Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Microsoft Reactor live stream event. If you're coming to us from East Coast, West Coast, wherever, we appreciate you coming through at this time to participate. We will be joined by Riaz Javed Butt presenting on modern workplace security with M365 Zero Trust Architecture. If this is your first time joining, please be aware that we will be recording this session and then posting it to our YouTube channel. I'll be sharing that link to our YouTube channel in the chat momentarily. So if you're not able to stick around for the entirety of the presentation, or if there's something that is mentioned that you want to reference at a later time, we will definitely have this up for you there, so you can always link over. For this presentation, please note that Riaz will be primarily reviewing and answering questions at the end. So if you do have a question that relates to a slide and content, feel free to publish it at the time that you're seeing it. It comes to mind, but just know that if he's not getting to it straight away, he will be reviewing those all at the conclusion. Also note that there's a slight delay between our presentation and it reaching your ears, about 20 seconds or so. So if he asks for a question, there might be a little bit of a dead space in between him asking and then answering. So just note that as well. And then just to note the Reactor program, we're always striving for new and engaging content. So I'm going to pop back on at the conclusion of the presentation and just provide you with a survey link and some information about the Reactor program itself. And if you are able to, we'd really appreciate that you follow up and submit on that survey. So at this time, I will give the floor to Riaz.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, based on the time zone where you are right now. I hope that you all are doing well. So today in this session, I'm actually going to talk about modern workplace security and how you can leverage the Microsoft 365 suite of products and secure your infrastructure and your cloud implementation as well. Nowadays, as we know that almost everybody is working from home, and we have the users working, from their home network and they're connecting to the office applications. We have empowered those users so that they can connect, but we also need to make sure that we have a adequate security in place so that we can protect our corporate identities, corporate data, and the information that matters a lot for the organization. So in this session, I will be more focused on talking about the tools or the ways that what you need to do as part of your information security policy or procedures in your organization to start protecting your data as well. So first thing first, before I actually jump onto the agenda and other topics of what we are going to talk about as part of this presentation, a high-level overview of myself. My name is Riaz Javed, as Rebecca said, and I'm actually a Microsoft Cloud Architect with a focus on the cloud security as well. I'm Microsoft Certified Trainer, I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I'm also certified for ISC Square as well with CISSP and CCSP certification. I'm an active blogger and I also talk in the public community forums as well. So if you guys want to follow me on Twitter or on my blog post, you guys are most welcome to do so. And you can connect me with my LinkedIn as well. So what we are going to talk about as part of this presentation is the very first one is I'm just going to give you a high level introduction of like what a modern workplace is, what threats that we have, how those threats are actually causing the issues for us as an organization. Then what is intelligent security? Again, we need to be in a mindset of a proactive approach versus a reactive approach, right? We do not want to react on security incidents after they are being, involved, and we have to engage the security teams, but we need to be proactive and monitor them and have a proactive measures in place so that we can detect them and respond to those incidents as well. Then what are our threat actors in the modern age, right? Where we have the users working from everywhere and we have SaaS applications, we have PaaS applications, we have infrastructure as a services offerings from multiple cloud providers. Then we will talk about how we can create our strategy to protect our modern workplace, right? How we can leverage the Microsoft suite of products to protect our modern workplace, and then how the suite of products are integrated with each other to provide us more unified view so that we can have more useful insights into our security infrastructure versus having a disconnected tools and they're not sharing the signals with each other and we're not getting the true insights that we should be getting, right? And how the zero trust architecture in a modern age is going to help us to achieve a secure workplace environment, allow using a Microsoft Threat Protection Suite, protecting our endpoints and our devices, and having a continuous monitoring on top of that. And lastly, we will just review the action items that we need to take back to our organization. And then we need to look at how we can evaluate our organization to make sure it is secure and we are on the right path to move forward to a more secure organizational framework. So first thing first is when we talk about the assumptions versus the reality in the modern age. In the past, we used to have users as our employees. That's it. But now in the modern age, what you have is you actually have your users and you have then, contractors, third-party partners, your customers. They all are leveraging your services in one way or the other way, right? And then we talk about our, corporate managed devices, that my boundary is only my corporate devices and I only actually have my corporate devices for the users to connect to. But now in the modern age, we talk about BYOD, right? We have different scenarios where, the users are using their personal devices to connect to the corporate resources, to do their job and, connect from anywhere. In the past, we used to have an on-prem world where we have everything deployed in our on-premises. But now, even the organizations that I've been working with and, I have worked with in the past as well, a lot of organizations, they do have their cloud-based policies as well, that they want to evaluate the cloud-based solution first before they can actually make a decision to go back and have an on-premises deployment of that application. Previously, we used to have an on-prem network and an on-prem firewall because everything is behind a firewall. So we really need to protect our, DMZ or anything that's coming inside my network through my DMZ or firewalls. But right now, your boundaries are no longer your inside network. You have your users connecting to the SaaS applications and the cloud applications, and they're not even bypassing or going through your internal network. So your network boundary is being expanded to the cloud as well. And the last and the most important one is how you are leveraging your SIM solutions, or you are actually collecting the packets and tracing those logs within the applications for the users and their behaviors as well. Now we have multiple sources available, right? You have Cloud One like Office 365, then you have services deployed in Azure, you have services deployed in your own private cloud, or you have services deployed in any other third-party public cloud as well. And you're collecting all those signals. The concern or the question is how you're going to correlate those signals and have more meaningful insights and identify the concerns from a security perspective and how you can actually respond to those threats as well. So what we need to do when we talk about the security, right? Considering the various, cybersecurity frameworks, I always advise to start with a security framework where you can leverage ISO, secure cybersecurity framework, or you can use CIS or the other frameworks as well. What those framework does for you is those cybersecurity frameworks help you to determine what to do, right? They are actually more focused from a security best practices and how you can protect your information. So pick which one is the best fit for you or your organization based on your regulatory compliance requirements and your industry that you guys are in from a business perspective. Second, and the important one is you need to identify the threats and the risks that are applicable for your organization, and they're common in your industry, right? Build your own threat matrix from there where you can actually have the information like what is a threat or risk. Considering that risk, how many phases or what would be the impact of that threat can have on your organization, and how likely is it going to occur for your organization as well based on the controls and everything that you have in place. And the last one is you need to do your cost benefit analysis to understand how much investment do I need to make to mitigate that threat or reduce that threat, right? So this is all that you actually need to do your identification. And then the next one is, which we all know is really, really important, is to have a good patch management. You need to patch your applications, your operating system layer, and your application, your databases servers, and have a continuous security updates deployed to them with an unlimited number of applications. I would say where every standard organization that I have worked with, or even the research study says that a standard enterprise organization is leveraging approximately 2,000 applications on average, right? Which is a lot. So we need to have a continuous patch management and the updates to those applications as well to make sure that we have all the latest security updates deployed, and then we are managing those risk associated with those applications as well. And the last one is integrated solutions, right? We have multiple solutions that we deploy to secure our cyber space, right? But those solutions, they might be good as a standalone solution, but it doesn't give you the full visibility, or it doesn't give you the full value if you do not have a consolidated view of your end-to-end cybersecurity posture, right? So that's important that when you're looking at the solution and how you need to protect that, you need to consider the fact that how we can have more integrated and a unified view of our threat landscape and how our cybersecurity solutions are sharing the signals with each other to protect the information. Just an example is that I would use with, we are leveraging Office 365 for emails, right? And we have Office 365 ATP deployed to protect our emails and everything. On the other side, we are also leveraging Microsoft Defender ATP to protect our endpoints. If there's a bad email, which is being sent to Riaz, and that email contains a bad URL, and Riaz clicked on that, 365 triggers an alert for that. If we have the signal sharing configured between 365 ATP and Defender ATP, then what happens is Defender automatically knows that, okay, there was a bad email delivered to Riaz and he clicked on that URL. Defender automatically kicked in the investigation on for you guys on Riaz endpoint to make sure that bad email did not have any impact on Riaz device. So it can protect Riaz device as well. So it's really important to have integrated solution that can work hand in hand to give you an end-to-end integrated security solution with a unified view as well. Next one is the security landscape, right? So I talked about, just some of the items that you probably need to do when it comes to the security of your organization, but why do we need that? Some of these studies that reflect these numbers that says that 43% of workers worldwide will be remote by 2023. I know that it's not true anymore because right now everybody is almost home. So probably this number is about 75 to 80% right now because offices get starts, people coming back to the offices and everything. But this is a study from the last year. So it's a huge number, right? So we have 43% of our population that will be working remotely by 2023. But this number can dramatically change based on this incident of COVID-19, and we're still living in that. So this number will change, right? And there's a huge number. And then you have 78% of your employees that does use their mobile devices for work, right? Almost everybody is using their mobile devices to do some work. Probably there might be like 10 or 15% exception users who doesn't use their mobile devices for work or personal devices for work is because the company policy does not allow that, right? But nowadays, BYOD, everybody is allowed to use their personal device to access corporate data to get their job done. So it's a huge number from a security perspective, and we need to consider how we are increasing the attack surface from a bad actor perspective, and where we need to actually have our controls to make sure our data is protected. We have 50% of the employees that spend their time in a collaborative work with other team members. That other team member could be this within their department, it could be within the organization, or it could be a team member with a business partner or an external contractor that they work with. So we need to consider the application and the data security. When that data is being shared with those teammates from a collaboration perspective, how do we retain a full control of our data, whether it's inside the organization or it's being shared outside of the organization? The last one is like 88% of the organizations, they're not even confident that they can detect and prevent the loss of their sensitive data. reason behind, because data is stored everywhere. It's in, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint Online, or say Office 365, Google Docs, other cloud providers like Box.com and the other providers as well. So the organizations do not have full visibility. That's why they're not confident that they can fully protect their data, because if I don't know my security boundaries, I cannot protect my security boundaries, right? So that's one another concern that the organizations have. So from a security perspective, if we look at that more closely, the very first one is more of your remote workforce, right? Where you need to protect your organizational devices remotely. Then the second one is you have your BYOD users and you need to protect the data on personal devices. The third one is the collaboration or the application of the data sharing, and we need to protect our data. And the last one is again data protection as well, that where my data is and how can I actually have my data protected when it comes to a collaboration and the sharing and everything. How do we secure our environment? What would be the approach that I would need to use, right, in order for me to protect my data? As I said previously as well, start with a cybersecurity framework. You can leverage any framework that best works for you guys based on your organization and the regulatory compliance or the international standards that you guys follow, right? So you can start with a cybersecurity framework that gives you a good starting point to start protecting your data. And then when you start leveraging the cybersecurity framework, the next step is like, as part of the framework, just an example, you might have a recommendation to use a multi-factor authentication, and that's where you perform your business impact analysis and the gap analysis to find out where the gaps are in your organization and how you can mitigate those gaps or minimize the risk associated with those threats as well, right? So identify the gaps in your security and then plan on mitigating those security threats or reducing the risk associated with those threats as well. Then the next one is once you have the solution in place, because security is an ongoing activity, you need to detect and respond to the cyber threats as well and have a continuous monitoring in place to monitor your cybersecurity and to make sure your application and your users and your devices, they are protected as per these standards and you have the required security controls deployed across the board. So what needs to be done when it comes to a cybersecurity or having these different controls deployed, and how do I get an optimum SOC or security operations for my organization? The answer is you need to have an end-to-end solution which is integrated and can provide you a more unified view. And that's where the Microsoft 365 E5 or M365 licensing or suite comes in, because it does give you the complete end-to-end solution that gives you the protection to your information, that gives you the protection to your device security, to your mobile devices, your insider risk management and email security and all of the security controls with the full visibility as well. I'm going to talk about those intelligent security features of M365 and how they can actually help you to protect your organizational security. So first one, as I said, is the intelligent security. And again, when we talk about the intelligent security, we need to consider the four big pillars, right? First one is my identity, because nowadays everything is associated with the identity versus the application of the user, right? So identity, how do I actually have a platform that can actually protect my identities? Very simple thing is like MFA. I need to make sure that users can, prove their identity and they can actually be secure in a way that a bad actor, even though he or she has the password or the credential for the user account, cannot get in. So the very first thing we need to think about the identity and access management, and that's where the Azure AD conditional access comes into the play, or Azure AD Premium, to help you define conditional access policies, have a risk-based policies for your users, right? Location-based policies, and then enforcing the system-based, monitoring of the users' profiling, and then having a policies based on the users' activities. The next one is the threat protection. How do you protect your endpoints or your emails, and how you actually protect against the threats? A threat can be delivered to your end user in the form of an email, which can be a bad email, a phishing email, right? Or it can be something which can be loaded to the end user device. Could be a malware, spyware, right? Or virus or something like that. But how do you protect that? That's where the Microsoft Threat Protection Suite comes into the play. Is it helps you to protect against the threats and have a more unified and integrated view for you to have end-to-end security. Like Office 365 ATP helps you to protect against the email protection, right? If you have bad emails that getting delivered to your users or phishing emails, Office 365 ATP can help you. Then the next one is the data. We talked about the identity part. We talked about the threads. Our next component is my data. How do I protect my data that's stored in either in an application server, database, or user's machine, or somewhere on the network? That's where the Azure Information Protection, the information protection in M365 E5 helps you to protect your users, that you identify your data, you classify and label the data, and then you have the protection on top of that that travels with a document, whether the document is shared internally or externally with a business partner, and you have full control even though that data is being sent outside of the organization. And the last one is the cloud security, right? We're talking about the cloud. We have users in the cloud. We have services in the cloud that we are leveraging. How do we protect our cloud, right? So we need to safeguard our cross cloud resources, like it can be Azure, it can be AWS, it can be Office 365 or GCP or the other cloud providers as well. How do I have a complete end-to-end cloud visibility? That's where the other solutions that comes into place, which are component of threat protection, or the CASB solution, which is Microsoft Cloud App Security, that gives you the full visibility across multiple clouds of what the users are doing and their activities and everything. I have been talking about the threats in my previous presentation, but I just wanted to highlight some of the threat actors that can actually expose you to the breaches as well, right? And there are different layers or different input points where this can happen. So let's first talk about the exposure, right? We have seen, and I have seen with the reporting as well, and if you look at the latest security reports, there are multiple things that actually can expose your organization to a breach. It can be your security misconfiguration, where the firewall actually have a SSH alert from the internet, just an example. Or it can be a vulnerability into the operating system, or it can be the infected administrative account, or your users are being compromised, their credentials are available on the dark web, or any other open entry point into your organization where the bad actor can get in and then can actually have access to your infrastructure. It could be your devices, it could be your databases, it could be your application servers or virtual machines, and then leveraging that access, that bad actor can actually do a lateral movement path to your most lucrative accounts like domain admin, enterprise admin, global admin accounts in 365, or any other admin accounts to get the password hashes, and then take actions that can impact your organization, like a data loss or ransomware or data exfiltration, or getting that data and causing the impact to your organization. If you look at that, it does look like, okay, it's a cloud-based deployment, we are secured, but again, you are managing everything from your on-premises or your internal network. Just an example is identities, right? On average, every other organization has an identity and access management solution like Active Directory at minimum, right? So if you have more than like 500 users, or I would say even 200 users, you do have some sort of an Active Directory or identity management solution deployed where you actually manage your identities and everything. So you have a entry point from a bad actor perspective that I can target your identity data stores and I can collect that data as well. So what's the roadmap for me to drive a secure workplace journey for me, right? So what should I be doing in order for me to actually have a more secure workplace in a more remote workforce place? So first one is we need to have a plan, right? There's nothing that we can do without a plan. If there's no plan, then we are preparing a recipe for a disaster, right? So create a plan, and we will talk about more in detail about the plans. Then once you have a plan, then you need to patch and update your systems, as I said previously as well. Make sure you have your security updates and everything installed on your machines before you can actually do anything else from a security perspective. Next one is secure your identities or secure authentication, right? With your users authenticating to Office 365 or any other provider, make sure you have a secure authentication. And when I talk about secure authentication, a minimum of MFA for every single user. Then you need to cover your bases in terms of what are your security risks or threats that can impact your organization, how you're going to cover or mitigate those risks as well, how you can reduce the risk of for your organization, and how you can actually monitor and govern them. Then you need to protect from the phishing or email security, because phishing is one of the key factors to actually compromise your user's account by sending just a one simple phishing email with an urgency level and then getting the data. So we will talk about how we can actually protect from phishing, like leveraging Office 365 ATP, just an example. And then you need to manage your devices where you have full control, even though the users are remote. Just an example, leveraging Intune, right? And then you need to secure your endpoints, leveraging the endpoint detection and response solution that can learn based on the user's behavior and analysis as well, like Microsoft Defender ATP. Once you have your endpoints or the device is secure, then you need to detect and respond based on the analytics that you're getting and the signals from a different solution that you have in place. And then next one is you actually have to have a security of the data where you know that what data can cause significant impact to the organization and what data cannot cause any impact to the organization, even if it's publicly advertised, like standard data that you have shared on your website, just an example. But you need to have the data security. And for your data security, you need to first understand what data is important for you, right? Not every data is important to the organization. And the last one and the important one is you need to have the visibility. You need to have a cloud application security or Microsoft MCAS or any cloud access security broker that can be act as a broker for your authentications and have everything pass through their system as well to be analyzed and have a full end-to-end security for your organization. So let's talk about the plan. When we're talking about the plan, what I need to consider and what I need to have in place for in order for me to create a plan, right? When we're talking about the plan, you need to first understand the business problem and what you're trying to solve, right? So in our scenario, when we talk about a plan from a security perspective, we talk about having a plan to reduce our threats and risks. And in order for me to reduce my threat and risk, I need to understand what my threats and risks are, right? And if they are applicable to my organization or my industry, then I need to have my own metrics built where I can define that what the threat or risk is for my organization and how that threat can impact my organization if there's an exposure, right? Or that threat is being exposed by a bad actor. And what's the probability of that threat that can be exposed, right? Is there something that can be done easily, or there's a probability that probably, 10% there's a 10% probability of like that threat can be leveraged to expose my organization. And then let's talk about the mitigation plan in your metrics, right? We have threat one. How do we mitigate or reduce the risk of that particular threat, right? That should be in your plan. And the last and the important one is the cost benefit analysis, right? When I talk about the cost, everything that you do in your organization that has a cost associated with that, right? So when you're looking at implementing an additional security tools, or you're looking at implementing a new processes to protect something, we need to first understand what I'm protecting. Based on that, we can define a cost. If I'm trying to protect an asset that values to my organization like $100, and in order for me to protect that $100 asset, I'm asking for an investment of about $10,000, then it doesn't make sense, right? It's not a useful business case for an organization. The useful business case can be I'm trying to protect an asset that costs about $10,000 to the organization, but I just need a workaround or a solution that can actually mitigate that risk by investing $100 or $200 or like $500. So that's something that we need to have in our plan so that we can actually follow our plan to identify and then prioritize accordingly. I have one example over here to talk about like how your matrix is going to look like when you're going to talk about your security risk and how you can protect that. In this matrix that I have a thread that's like sensitive information being shared, right? And it can be shared by the users deliberately, or it can be shared by mistake from a user perspective as well, right? So the impact is very high because if the sensitive information and the company's secrets are being shared by mistake or it is being exposed externally, then we will have a bad impact on my organization, right? but the probability is pretty low because we know that the users does understand this is the confidential information they should not be sharing. But again, there is a risk and there's a probability that it can happen, right? What my possible solutions could be, what I can implement in order for me to secure that, right? The very first thing we can think of is like a DLP policies. We have an egress monitoring in place, and we protect our, sensitive data leaving the organization. You can have a, session-based controls like leveraging Microsoft Cloud App Security as part of your M365 suite. You can have Office message encryption to protect sensitive data, even though there might be a scenario or a business requirement where that sensitive data needs to be shared with the external business partner. So you have your information protection or Office message encryption deployed to make sure that data is sent to the only intended parties versus having an unintended exposure to an unwanted party as well. You can prevent your automatic forwarding of the data. And the list goes on as well based on which egress point or from where we're trying to protect the data and a medium that can be used to send that data as well to the outside of the organization. And then the next one is again your cost factor, whether the cost is going to be low or it's going to be high or it's going to be medium. What will be my cost in order for me to implement the solution right now? As I said, I actually documented or listed for my example. I have multiple solutions, right? But we're more focused on like the mediums that can be used like email. So I know that if as sensitive data, if I need to stop that data being shared externally, I know that what solutions I have available for me, and then I can do a cost benefit analysis of these solutions and then pick out the best solution that works for my organization. Then the second one, which I have been talking all the time, is the patching and the updates of your system, right? Updates are always important. We cannot neglect the updates. The updates published by the application vendors, whether it's Microsoft or a third-party application or the operating system. We need to make sure we have the latest and the greatest updates installed because it does have a lot of bug fixes and security vulnerabilities remediations which are publicly known. So as a bad actor, if there's a vulnerability which is exposed for an operating system or an application, and there's a patch available and we are not patching it, we are actually giving an opportunity to the bad actor to get into our infrastructure because we have our attack surface open for them, right? And again, with the patching, we actually reduce our attack surface as well because there might be, as part of the patching, there might be some vulnerability fixes or there might be some security bug fixes which were available in the version that we have. And again, you need to monitor the risk as part of your patch and update management because it can break your application. It can have a devastating impact to your end user productivity. So we need to make sure we have a balance between the end user productivity and our cloud security or the security of our infrastructure. Keep in mind, patch management is actually a process that needs to go through the change management, and everything that we do from a security perspective should follow a change management process. But patching, when it comes to the application update, especially like a version updates or something like that, that change is something which everybody wants to have in the organization, but no one wants to lead that change because there might be a lot of unknowns when you're deploying the latest and the greatest version of like what could be the end user experience. Can we use the other organizational information in terms of the white papers to understand the impact or the key risk or the issues that they have faced? So everybody is reluctant to lead the change, but everybody wants to have a change. So make sure when we talk about the patching and the updates, we actually talk about the change management, release management processes as well to ensure that we are not exposing our organization to any major risk. And then the secure identities, right? How do you secure your identities? As I said earlier as well, a minimum of having an MFA in place. Multi-factor authentication can have a bad impact to the user when it comes to like, their experience with the tool or their experience using the technology, right? So end user MFA is important because it makes sure that even the user credentials are being compromised. The bad actor cannot get into the system because the second factor authentication needs to happen at minimum, right? So make sure you have MFA enabled for all your users and for all your administrators as well. And I'm very surprised, and you guys might have seen the report as well, that we still have like roughly at least 40% of the organizations that do not use MFA, right? So we need to make sure we start using the MFA as soon as possible, because your identity is the first step and the most important one to compromise anything in your organization, right? MFA can be implemented with the help of a conditional access policies in Azure Active Directory. And once you have the MFA in place, let's talk about the legacy authentication. We need to make sure that we do not use any legacy protocol in our organization, right? And right now, because we're talking about more of a modern workplace security, I will be more focused for the 365 side or the M365. You need to make sure you do not use the basic or the legacy protocols in your Exchange Online or the other deployments as well, because these protocols are still enabled and they are available for the users to leverage as well. So this can be blocked using the conditional access policies as well. Leverage the identity protection to gain more insights into your identities, right, or the user's behavior in terms of the abnormal login behaviors, and check their activities so that the risk can be calculated for the users, right? And then you actually can consider moving your organization to the passwordless authentication, like for admin accounts at minimum, so that if you do not have anything to compromise when it comes to a password, like in order for someone to compromise an administrative account, they need to have a username and password. And if I do not have a password, I'm using a passwordless authentication, then that attack surface is no longer there. And then have deploy Azure ATP. Yeah, I mean, I talk to my customers, I talk to the third-party organizations as well. And my first recommendation, if you really need to have a full insights into your identity security, you need to consider and have a identity or the insider risk management solution in place. And Azure ATP is one of the best solutions that I have worked with in the past and in right now as well. That gives you the full insights into your identity security, lateral movement path, your passwords exposed in a clear text. Deploy Azure ADP. It is included as part of the M365 as well. So this diagram is just to reflect how the conditional access works, right? You have a user who is trying to access a service or an application, and as part of that service, what he is doing is he is connecting to the service, and then it's going through a engine or the Azure Active Directory where the access conditions are being configured of what conditions the users can access the service. And if the users meets those conditions, he's being allowed to access the resource, or he will be blocked to remediate the recommendations that are provided as part of the authentication mechanism. Now, the Office 365, we do know that, and this is something I actually have in this slide for a reason is whenever we talk about 365, the general perception that I usually get is we allow everything 365 and it is secure. Yes, it is secure, but we need to keep in mind that there are certain configurations in 365 which are available to us as an administrator or the security administrators, but those settings are not configured because every organization has its own requirements and every organization is unique. So we need to make sure that we protect our Office 365 and we review the default settings of the 365 as well. Just an example is you have a guest account, and a guest account by default in Office 365 can also invite another guest account, right? So if you plan to have a monitor or controlled guest access to your organization, you need to modify these settings. Then we talk about the mailbox plan as an example. I talked about that in my previous slides as well, that you need to block your insecure or legacy protocols like basic authentication, right? These settings are enabled on a per mailbox level and they are enabled by default. Those protocols are available, the users can use them, and it's highly recommended from a security perspective that you disable them, right? And then like Azure AD application registration. By default, a user can consent for an application and register with the Azure AD to have that application to read your data as well, which is more of a shadow ID, right? So we need to make sure that we actually review the default settings from a 365 perspective to make sure it is secure the way that we think that it is secure. Because again, these are the responsibilities that we as a customer of Microsoft, we have those responsibilities Those features are available to us, and we are the one who needs to make a decision whether we want to enable those features or disable those features. By default, they are enabled because of the end users adoption and all those type of things. Next thing is the email security, right? So when we talk about the email security, the biggest threat is the phishing emails, right? You have email coming in for with an urgency, and the users sharing a sensitive information as part of that. Office 365 ATP can be used to protect the emails, and what it does is it has three major components, right? One, we talk about safe links, where it's going to provide you the protection at the time of click, which means when the user is going to click on any URL as part of the email, is going to first scan the URL in the Microsoft Sandbox environment on the backend to understand if that URL is going to harm anything on the end user's machine. If it's a good one, it will automatically redirect that URL, and the users will be able to see the web page. And the delay is in milliseconds, and the user even doesn't observe anything from their perspective. Then the second factor that I can actually get into the user's machine or have a bad email delivered to them is sending some bad attachment. Office 365 safe attachment feature actually scans every single attachment that is coming inside or going outside of the organization, or even within the organization as well, to scan it to make sure that attachment, when the user is going to download or open up that attachment from the email, is not going to impact the end user's machine or compromise the machine. And then the third and the most important one is the anti-phishing policies, where you actually have a users to to understand and trigger the alerts and move the emails that are being sent from the sensitive mailboxes like CFO, CEO, or head of your HR, those type of mailboxes. You can have those emails spoof phishing rules configured, and you can block the phishing of your domains and your users accounts as well as an impersonation. The other cool features that are available to the you guys or the organization as part of the Office 365 ATP is the automated incident response, or the new name is automated investigation and response, where what it does is it actually automatically triggered an investigation on the back end based on the content being delivered to the user, like a zero-day attack. And then based on that investigation, it automatically recommends you for certain actions that this investigation is being performed for you. And this is the recommendation. And as an administrator, you can approve it or deny it. There are certain actions that it can take automatically without getting the approval, but the certain actions that does require administrative approvals, like just an example, a bad email is being delivered, and it's a zero-day attack that has a bad URL, because now ATP safe link is going to provide the protection at the time of click. So we need to make sure that that email is being worked on and that email is being remediated, right? So ATP or Office 365 ATP AIR will automatically perform the investigation and recommends the actions like delete the email or block the URL and stuff like that. And the last one is you can actually use the campaigns and everything to educate your users and have a training for them as well to understand which users are more volatile and which users can actually need to go to the training to understand how they need to understand which email is a good one and which one is a bad one, even though if it makes to the mailbox as well after all the scannings and the security controls. Device management, we talked about that previously as well. So we have remote workers working from home, so we need to have a solution in place like Intune that helps you to actually configure the policies for your devices to have like compliance policies, enrollment restrictions, and you can deploy like autopilot and the application protection policies to make sure the devices which are connecting to your organization and the application services, they are fully protected and they have all the information from a endpoint security perspective, then it's being fully managed by the organization administrators, because the users are remote. So your GPOs are not going to work, or the profile management tool. So you need a cloud-based tool like Intune to have a full control of our devices and manage the configuration and the security controls on our endpoints. And this is true for BYOD devices as well. If you have a BYOD policies in your organization, mostly the organizations actually that I work with as well, is they actually does allow corporate data access on the BYD devices, but we have application protection policies configured where we restrict the access or the copy paste of the data from managed application to a non-managed app. When we talk about the managed app, we actually have those applications protected and managed through the application protection policies. So we know that even if the users have access to corporate data on their personal device, they cannot have that data shared or get it outside of that application, and we have full control of the application. Next one is the endpoint security, right? So we have the device compliance and the security configurations, but we need to consider the endpoint detection and response capabilities as well, even on the mobile devices or your endpoints as well. And that's where Microsoft Defender ATP comes into the play that provides you a cloud-based protection for your endpoints. You can configure the behavior analysis and all of the things as well, where you actually analyze the user's behavior and have a behavior profile and unified behavior analysis, which can help you to understand the user's behavior and how they are interacting with other users in the organization and how that data can be exposed or the device security can be performed. Endpoint security does have threat and vulnerability management that's continuously scanning the endpoints and giving you a report of, which vulnerabilities exist on your endpoint and how you actually need to prioritize and work on those vulnerabilities to remediate them to have more secure and reduce attack surface as well for your organization. And once we have our application device security and the user security as well, then we need to talk about consider our data security. That can be done leveraging the AIP, or I would say Microsoft Information Protection Suite, or the MCAS. And what we need to consider in our data security is we need to look at the how we define our scenario of like communication flow, what my data is, how I need to protect that data, and what should be the classification, and who should have the access or who should be the decision maker, right? Once you identify your data, then you actually need to have a defined classification of the data and the protection on top of that, right? And then you actually deploy those restrictions and the policies to your data, and then you do a continuous monitoring like DLP controls, or you can leverage AIP or Microsoft Information Protection Suite as part of the M365 suite to protect your data in a modern workplace. Last topic from a modern workplace security perspective is the Microsoft Cloud App Security, right? Microsoft Cloud App Security, what it is and what it does for your organization is it actually passes every single information coming inside your organization, and it actually helps you to identify and understand the flow of the traffic so that you can monitor the activities. You can have a full visibility of the user sessions, and you can actually protect your data as well. Some of the common scenarios with the AMCAS is the discovery of the shadow ID, where we actually have the visibility of the shadow ID applications running in your organization, which are sanctioned and unsanctioned. And you can define your controls like based on the application risk or based on the application credibility, whether you want to approve it, you want to block that application. You can govern your cloud application data as well. And you can actually monitor for alerts like, data filtration or the other alerts as well. Then the data protection. MCAS actually does perform the data protection for you, and it does have a module that actually can help you to classify and protect your data in the cloud, where it actually understand what your data is and the exposure, and then it actually protect the data in a real time to make sure you do not have any data leakage. You can classify as well and protect your data no matter where it is stored with the help of MCAS, because MCAS is your gatekeeper for everything coming in and going outside of your organization. And then you monitor your risk and investigate any violations for your data security as well. And the last one is the cloud detection, right? So MCAS does provide you a single console or single view to have full visibility of your threads that are being delivered in the persistency, IOCs, and your sessions, malicious use of your end user accounts from an identity perspective, and the malicious use of your privileged users as well. Like, malicious user accesses like ransomware activity, unusual file download or deletion of the files, or malicious OAuth applications accessing or connecting to your cloud as well. So you can have the policies configured to trigger the alerts and auto remediation and the automation as well to make sure that your data is protected. And the last one is the monitoring, right? You need to actually have, a single dashboard or a SIM solution where you can actually have a full view of every single log or event that's being generated in your organization from a security perspective, and you have your automated, view as well. Because the thing is, you have multiple solutions that you have in your organization that are deployed, and they're generating a ton of data. So Microsoft Azure Sentinel, you can actually have Azure Sentinel or the Cloud App Security integrated with the other workloads as well, that you can leverage to have one centralized repository of all the events, and then have your machine learning and artificial intelligence on top of that to actually generate the alerts and automatically respond to the alerts and the noise as well, to make sure that you are actually having a proactive SOC operations versus a reactive approach. And this is just a update to the previous slide that I actually have, earlier today, where I was sharing the conditional access and just sharing like when you have a full M365 E5 suite deployed, how your users' identities in a zero trust architecture are going to be protected is you have a user trying to log into the application or service that goes to the Azure Active Directory, right? Azure Active Directory, what it does, it's going to evaluate the user based on your organizational policies, right? And then it's going to look at the user risk and the device risk from where the policies or the user is trying to access. Once that evaluation is done, in order for us to increase the trust, it can be prompted for MFA. And based on that, if there's any issues, it can redirect the users to do a self-service password reset, to do a password change because probably users' credentials are leaked or some other issues happen. Unless it's all good, we can have conditional access to give full access to the user. We can have conditional access to give access to but restrict in a restricted session with the MCAS policies on the backend. And we can have some other monitor and restricted access for the users for the application as well. It can all be done with the help of M365 E5 suite and a centralized identity mechanism and a secure mechanism as well. With that being said, let's talk about the key takeaways from this session and what we need to do when we go back to our organization, right? The first thing is we need to understand that the modern workplace security is not something that we start today and it will be done by tomorrow, right? It's a journey, and it's a journey to change the mindset as well. And it's a journey to actually, keep on doing something on a regular basis. Start with your identity protection, which is the key for your zero trust, right? Have MFA in place for your users and your administrators. Then look at your data classifications. Understand your data lifecycle, classify the data, label it, and then protect the data, whether it's inside the organization or outside the organization. Reduce your attack surface. It can be reduced with the help of endpoint detection or response EDR solution like Microsoft Defender ATP. It can be done with a device management solution or the other solutions as well. Reduce your attack surface and then monitor and respond to the cyber threats proactively. Once you had a centralized dashboards or reportings and everything, monitor and proactively respond to those threats. And the last and the most important one is educate your end users. Educate your end users, perform some end user training programs, and train your users and help them to understand the cyber landscape as well, and how they can be a part of a good cybersecurity organizational framework as well. With that being said, I'm going to open up the forum for questions if you guys have any question, and I'm happy to answer you guys. And then I will hand it over to Rebecca so that she can actually talk more about the, Microsoft Reactor program as well. I'm going to check the questions if we have any. So I can see the question there. Hello, this is great so far. Will this slide deck be available? From Dominic. Yes, Dominic, this PowerPoint deck will be available and the recording of this session will be uploaded to the YouTube channel as well. So I will be keeping an eye to the Q&A session, and meanwhile, Rebecca, it's over to you now so that you can talk about more about the Reactor program as well.
Hello, and thank you. As we wait for those questions to come in, let me just switch over to this screen here and share my deck with you all. Stand by. Sorry about that. I didn't have it up and ready. Here we go. So just in the same vein as security goes, I wanted to share with you a couple of our upcoming events that also touch on various forms of security within our technology and our businesses. So on September 29th, part of a 4-part Teams series, they're covering best practices for security and compliance in Teams itself. So if you're looking for an internal use app to communicate with both your teams and your customers, this event should cover some of that. So definitely if you're looking into various platforms and resources for how you want to execute your internal business structure, I would definitely, in addition to this wonderful presentation by Riaz in regards to M365, also consider Teams. We also have Azure Sentinel, which is another form of security protection using AI in the cloud to detect and investigate threats. So if interested in further security learning, these are 2 events that we have coming up for September. Also, if you are not part of the community yet, maybe you belong to our meetup or you follow us on Twitter, definitely consider signing up to some of these other areas because we always have an amazing array of events constantly popping up. We have events that we put on ourselves with our internal teams. We have Microsoft MVPs such as Riaz that are, valuable people within our community that take the opportunity to present to you. So definitely these other resources might be helpful to locate events that maybe not necessarily promoted on one meetup location because of time zone differences, but if you're a night person or an early morning person, you might find events in other time zones through our Reactor program that have featured events that you might be interested in as well. So definitely check out the various calendars that we have available. And then finally, on my end, we have a survey. If you've been on our events before, you know about our surveys, but we do ask that you take the time to fill it out and submit. It is a little bit long, we understand that, but we do look at this. We use it as a go-to for future events, what your interests are, how we can improve, everything like that. So if you could take the time, we do utilize this information and we greatly appreciate your feedback as our attendees. So that is the end of my side of things. I haven't seen any additional questions come in, just a nice comment that no questions are needed, but if you have anything, feel free to ask now. If you have questions that come up later and you'd like additional information, certainly feel free to message us on our meetup and we can always relay that information and get additional feedback from Riaz as well. Riaz, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap this up?
Nope, I'm good. I think this was a great opportunity. And I really appreciate that you guys actually give me the opportunity to present and from a community perspective, because I have been a part of the community as well from the other side. So I do understand that. I really appreciate your effort over here to help the community to learn and make sure you guys are bringing the right resources so that they can share the knowledge and the information so we all can learn. So really appreciate all your effort.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here as well. And this was great. And with that, I think we will call it an end. Again, the recording will be up on our YouTube channel probably within the next, I'd say, it's Thursday, so it might not be up until Monday, but definitely check back to the YouTube. And also there's lots of content up there, various forms, so you can explore that as well just to see past events that we've had. We're always updating that, so check in there as well. There's so many avenues of information floating around. Have a good rest of your day.